So yes, a court in Hong Kong has said that the Hong Kong arm of Evergrande will be liquidated. Now, it's not the mainland China bit of the company, and the executive director there has said things will continue to operate as normal on the mainland. But that said, most of the assets are held on mainland China, and those are the things that can be seized and sold off in order to repay creditors. There is an agreement between courts in Hong Kong and courts in China to allow that to happen. But of course, this is a process that could take months or even years to get underway.
That is fascinating. So at this point, there is a prospect that they will challenge this liquidation order. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Evergrande can appeal this liquidation order, but the judge has said enough is enough. You've got to remember, this has been going on for years. Evergrande has been given a huge amount of time to come up with some kind of debt restructuring, and it failed to do that. In fact, it only came up with sort of an 11th hour proposal, which the court just said, this is ridiculous. You need to go away and deal with the fact that you have not engaged in the process. So we are saying enough is enough, and we want this liquidation to happen. It's not the first time, of course, that a Chinese property company has been liquidated in this way. There have been a number of others since this property crisis came about. But clearly, this is the world's most indebted company. It's got the dubious honor of being the poster child for the Chinese property crisis. So what has happened today is likely to send shockwaves through the global economy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So with those other examples that you point to, have those companies gone on to be liquidated completely?
It's still an incredibly slow process. As I say, if you're talking about the engagement between the courts in Hong Kong and the courts in China, although this agreement has been struck, it takes months. First of all, you have to pinpoint which bit of the company that you want to sell off. Then you have to start engaging in that process. And we are still only very much at the beginning of the line in all of those processes. And of course, a lot of people are wondering whether or not the Chinese government is going to step in, particularly when you're talking about Evergrande, which many people have said is too big to fail. A lot of people have thought that by now we would have seen moves. So perhaps it is prepared to let this sector fail in order to protect the rest of the economy.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. But surely if this sector fails, the impact on the rest of the economy is almost impossible to stop.
Yes, there would likely be a huge amount of contagion. When you think about all of those people that have bought their homes that they're unable to live in, or they're living in homes which have not been completed, all those building materials suppliers that are still waiting to be paid for the materials that they have delivered, and of course the banks. If they see a huge number of defaults, then they are going to be more reluctant to loan to people within the Chinese economy. And that just then builds on the slowdown that we're already seeing. And it's not just, of course, China that's affected. It is also companies around the rest of the world. I'm thinking particularly of miners in Australia. If the building sector in China isn't able to continue to operate, and certainly slows down even further than we have seen, then demand for things like iron ore will just drop off a cliff from China. And that has a massive knock-on to companies like BHP.
Indeed, such a good point. Do you think, though, that the government under Xi Jinping has shown sort of not necessarily the desire to prop up sectors that can't perform and that perhaps cannot be salvaged?
I think what we're seeing is a split between the old regime and, of course, the private sector. This is a government that does not want the private sector to be able to get away with things with impunity. It wants to be able to make sure, of course, that those people, hardworking Chinese people who have put their money into homes, can get those homes. But also it wants to make sure that the economy as a whole is protected, and that those bad apples that have really sort of pushed things to the limit do not repeat that in the future.
Danni, really good to get your analysis of what's happened today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.